The photograph showed a dog moving along a riverbank. That was all. A single frame from a camera trap, time-stamped at 5:47 in the morning, taken on a day in March when the temperature at that location had dropped to 3 degrees Celsius overnight. The dog was moving east, along the south bank of Millhaven Creek, and it was moving fast. I looked at that photograph for a long time before I understood what I was actually seeing. The animal in the frame was a border collie mix, black and white, adult, medium-large build, moving with the low, deliberate gait of an animal that knows exactly where it is going. The timestamp on the image was 14 months old. The camera that took it had been placed there to photograph water rats. Nobody had looked at this image in 14 months. Nobody had filed a report. Nobody had made a call. Nobody had opened the folder in the archive where it had been sitting since March of the previous year. And somewhere in a government record that I had not yet read, that dog was listed as deceased. I am Mara Calloway. I am a wildlife research associate at a regional university, and I have spent 11 years documenting non-target captures in fauna monitoring programs across inland river corridors. I was not looking for a missing dog when I found this photograph. I was looking for evidence of the eastern water rat in a stretch of the Millhaven Creek system, reviewing archived camera trap data from a survey that had ended before I joined the project. That is how cases like this begin. Not with an investigation, but with a wrong turn that turns out to be right. Now let us go back to the beginning. If cases like this keep you up at night, subscribe to Lost and Wild so you never miss one. And leave a comment telling us what country and city you are watching from. We read every single one. Now, let us go back to the beginning. The Millhaven Creek corridor runs for approximately 22 kilometers through mixed grazing and cropping country in a semi-arid inland region. It is not a famous river. It does not appear on tourist maps. What it is a working waterway, used for stock watering, flood irrigation, and the kind of quiet rural activity that generates no headlines and very little documentation. In early March, in the year this case begins, a male border collie mix weighing approximately 27 kilograms was reported to the Regional Animal Control Authority as a stray on a grazing property that borders the creek in its lower section. The property belonged to a man named Dale Pritchard, who had operated that land for over 30 years. The dog was collected from the Pritchard property by an animal control officer on the morning of March 15th at 7:40 a.m. The collection is logged in the regional authority's digital intake record with a single line. One adult male dog, black and white, stray, collected from rural property on Millhaven Road. No breed is specified. No microchip scan is recorded at intake because the facility's handheld scanner was logged as out for calibration on that date. This detail will matter. It will matter more than anything else in this case, except for one handwritten sentence in a notebook that I did not find until 8 weeks into my investigation. Border collies and their crossbreeds are widely documented in veterinary behavioral research as among the most spatially capable domestic dogs. Their working memory for object location tasks has been measured in peer-reviewed trials as significantly exceeding most other breeds, with individual animals able to recall specific geographic locations across intervals of several months. This is a function of their history as working animals developed to hold and navigate large territories independently. A border collie mix that had been moving through an area learns that area. It does not forget. On March 15th, the same morning the dog was collected, Dale Pritchard was present at the property boundary during the collection. The duty officer's digital record notes his presence. What the digital record does not note is what Pritchard said to the officer in that conversation. I know what he said because 6 weeks into my investigation, I found the duty officer's original handwritten field notebook in a storage box that had not been reviewed since the notebook was replaced at the end of that year. What Pritchard said to the officer, and what the officer wrote down in that notebook, is the reason this case is not simply a bureaucratic error. It is the reason I am still thinking about it, but we are not there yet. The holding kennel at the Regional Animal Control Facility contained 12 individual runs. The dog was placed in run 7 on the afternoon of March 15th. The facility's procedure for unclaimed stray animals required a mandatory 5-day holding period before any euthanasia order could be issued, in compliance with the regional authority's published welfare protocol. This was not a guideline. It was a documented requirement. No adoption listing was created for this animal during the holding period. No photograph was taken for the public database. The microchip scan had not been completed. On March 17th, 2 days into the mandatory 5-day holding period, a euthanasia order was signed. The order was dated March 17th. The signature on the order belonged to the facility's duty officer. The euthanasia procedure was recorded as completed that afternoon. The physical record for the animal, a brown manila folder with the intake date handwritten on the tab, was closed and filed in a cabinet in the facility's administrative block. The case was over, except the camera trap on the south bank of Millhaven Creek, 4 kilometers from the Pritchard property, captured a black and white dog moving east at 5:47 in the morning on March 18th. The morning after the procedure was recorded as completed. I need to be honest about how long it took to reach the photograph. 14 months passed between the morning that image was taken and the evening I first looked at it on a screen in my research base, 40 kilometers from the creek. During those 14 months, the folder sat closed in the cabinet. During those 14 months, whatever had produced that image was alive and moving through the landscape. And during those 14 months, the question of what had actually happened on March 17th at the facility existed only in the difference between a digital record and a handwritten notebook entry that nobody thought to read. Time is the operative word in this case. It is the operative word in most cases. Animals that disappear do not disappear into nothing. They disappear into time, into the gap between the moment something happens and the moment anyone looks closely enough to understand what it was. The Millhaven Creek corridor changed in those 14 months. The reed beds in the lower section thickened. The water levels dropped through summer and rose again through the wet season. The collapsed timber footbridge at the 2-kilometer mark was further consumed by the vine growth that had been working on it for years. And somewhere in the 14 kilometers between the creek and the decommissioned rural road to the east, an animal was learning the territory. A woman named Elena Voss had been the Regional Animal Control Authority's compliance manager for 9 years by the time this case reached her desk. She is not a villain in this story in any simple sense. She ran a facility with 2 full-time officers and a caseload that routinely exceeded its administrative capacity. The intake scanner had been logged as out for calibration on March 15th because the replacement unit had been delayed in procurement for 6 weeks. These are the kinds of operational details that generate errors without generating intent. But the holding period requirement was not a procedural ambiguity. It was a published standard, and it had not been met. The person who changed the direction of this case was a graduate student named Hemi Tain, who had placed the camera trap on the south bank of Millhaven Creek to document eastern water rat activity in the riparian zone. Hemi had finished his thesis and left the university by the time I began reviewing the archived data from his monitoring network. The camera had been collecting images since February of the previous year. By the time I accessed the archive, it contained over 4,000 images across 11 trap stations. The dog appeared in one of them. One image, one morning, 5:47 a.m. What made me stop on that image was not the dog. It was the gait. A dog moving like that, low and deliberate and directional in pre-dawn darkness along a riverbank, is not wandering. It is traveling. It knows where it is going. I have spent enough time watching wildlife camera footage to read movement, and that movement told me something was wrong with the story behind this animal. I ran the image against the regional stray animal database. There was no intake record matching a black and white border collie mix collected from the Millhaven Road area in that month. The database showed no animal matching that description at all for the entire quarter. I went back to the facility records. The manila folder was easy enough to locate through a public records request. What I found inside it was a single-page intake form, a handwritten notation of the collection date and location, and the signed euthanasia order dated March 17th. The form noted the scanner as unavailable at intake. The microchip field was blank. I copied everything. Then I asked the authority for the duty officer's original field notebooks for the period covering March 14th through March 20th. This request took 3 weeks. When the notebook arrived as a scanned document, I opened it on my laptop at the trestle table in my research base at 11 o'clock at night. With a cold cup of tea beside me and the topographic map of the creek corridor pinned to the wall behind me, I found the entry for March 15th on page 44. The duty officer's handwriting was small and regular, the kind of handwriting produced by someone who writes in the field every day. The entry covered the Pritchard collection in 4 lines. The 4th line read, "Farmer state's animal was already supposed to be in the river." That sentence was not in the digital record. I sat with that sentence for a long time. Then I called a colleague. The sentence meant one of 2 things. Either Pritchard had told the officer that someone else had attempted to drown the dog before the animal control collection, or Pritchard had told the officer that he himself had attempted to drown the dog and it had survived. The phrasing, already supposed to be, was not the language of a witness describing a third party. It was the language of a person describing a plan that had not gone as expected, and the officer had written it down, and then had not entered it into the digital record, and had signed a euthanasia order 48 hours early. This is where the case changes shape entirely. What had appeared to be a procedural failure at an underfunded regional facility was now something more deliberate. The question was no longer whether the protocol had been followed. The question was whether the outcome of the March 17th procedure had actually occurred. I contacted a veterinary forensic specialist at a university 200 kilometers away. I explained the situation without framing it as anything other than an administrative audit. I asked a single question. If a microchip scan had never been conducted on intake, was there any mechanism by which the physical animal could have left the facility between March 15th and March 17th without any record existing of its departure? The specialist said yes. If an animal was removed from a run before a scan was conducted, and if the physical records were manually completed rather than system-generated, a departure could be recorded as a euthanasia without contradiction in the existing documentation. There would be no second set of numbers that did not match. There would only be a blank microchip field on an intake form, and a photograph from a camera trap on a riverbank, and one handwritten sentence in a field notebook. I had to find the dog. The camera trap image was geotagged to coordinates on the south bank of the creek, 4 kilometers from the Pritchard property. The dog was moving east. If it had been moving east on that morning, and if it had continued moving east, the terrain opened into a section of decommissioned rural road about 14 kilometers from the camera position. That road had been closed to traffic for 11 years following flood damage to the culvert system beneath it. The culverts were large, corrugated steel pipes, each approximately 1 meter in diameter, running beneath the old road formation. The culverts had never been removed. In 11 years, they had silted partially at the entrances and been colonized by vegetation. They were dry for 8 months of the year. I drove out to that section of road on a Tuesday morning in May with 2 colleagues and a long-range scanner borrowed from the university veterinary faculty. We did not announce ourselves. We parked the vehicle 200 meters from the culvert section and walked in with the scanner and a bag of food. I had brought the kind of food that would carry a smell a long distance on the morning air. We waited. The dog appeared at the eastern culvert entrance at 23 minutes past 8. It was exactly what the camera trap image had shown me. Black and white, adult, medium-large, deliberate. It stood at the culvert entrance, and it did not run. It watched us with the steady, amber-gold attention of an animal that has been watching humans from a distance for a long time, and has made a calculation about this particular set of humans that it has not yet completed. What happened next is the part of this case I will carry with me for a long time. My colleague, who had worked in animal welfare before moving into research, crouched down and placed the food on the ground and moved back. The dog did not come immediately. It waited 4 minutes, which is a long time when you are kneeling on a decommissioned road in a cold May morning with your heart doing something complicated in your chest. Then it walked forward, and when it was close enough, my colleague ran the scanner across the back of its neck. The scanner beeped once. A number appeared on the screen. The microchip was there. It had always been there. It was registered. The registration number connected to a database entry made 4 years earlier, in a neighboring regional authority's jurisdiction, to a person whose name and contact details were current and active. The dog was alive. It had been alive for 14 months since the date recorded as the date of its death. Its coat was rough from outdoor living, but its body condition was functional. When we brought it to the examination room for a full veterinary assessment that afternoon, the veterinarian documented 3 specific findings. First, a healed laceration along the left rib cage consistent with a blunt external force, age estimated at 14 to 18 months. Second, a respiratory hyperreactivity pattern producing an involuntary high-pitched vocalization when water was applied to the muzzle during bathing, a documented stress response associated in the veterinary literature with acute near-drowning events in dogs. Third, a fold in the cartilage of the left ear consistent with sustained compression trauma, the kind that results from prolonged physical restraint. Each of those findings told a part of a story that the duty officer's handwritten sentence had begun to tell. Domestic dogs with double coats like border collies can survive submersion in water above 4 degrees Celsius for up to 40 minutes before lethal hypothermia begins. The creek temperature in March at the Millhaven location averaged 7 degrees Celsius. Whatever had happened to this dog by that river, the animal's physiology had given it a window. It had used the window. The formal complaint was lodged with the Regional Animal Control Authority in week 12 of my investigation. The authority initiated an internal review. The review confirmed the following: the 5-day holding period had not been met. The microchip scan had not been conducted on intake. The duty officer's handwritten field notes contained a statement from the property owner that had not been entered into the digital record. The euthanasia procedure recorded on March 17th could not be verified through independent documentation because no secondary record existed. Elena Voss, as compliance manager, commissioned a full audit of intake protocols across the facility's operational history going back 5 years. That audit found 43 instances of incomplete microchip scans during the period of scanner procurement delays, spanning 14 months. The duty officer received a formal reprimand. No criminal charges were filed against the officer or against Dale Pritchard. The authority's solicitor determined that the evidence was insufficient to sustain a prosecution under the relevant animal welfare statutes. The handwritten sentence in a field notebook was not, on its own, proof of a completed act. What the authority did do, within 6 months of the complaint being lodged, was amend its intake protocol to require mandatory microchip scanning within 48 hours of collection for all animals, with a documented override procedure requiring supervisor authorization in the event of scanner unavailability. That protocol change is now in writing. It is not undone by the absence of criminal proceedings. The dog was transported to the address on the microchip registration in week 14. The person whose name was on the registration had reported the dog missing 4 years earlier, had filed a report with a different regional authority, and had received no further contact. The reunion was not filmed. I was not present. I have a one-line email from my colleague who made the delivery. The email says the dog walked straight into the house. The Border Collie's documented spatial memory for locations across intervals of months is a function of thousands of years of selective breeding for work that required holding a territory and returning to it. That capacity, which exists as a practical adaptation for herding, is what allowed this animal to orient itself in the dark, moving east along a riverbank, the morning after it should have been dead. It knew where it was. It used that knowledge. The creek is still there. The camera trap that Hemi Tain placed on the south bank was removed when the monitoring program ended. The collapsed footbridge at the 2-kilometer mark is a little more consumed by vine than it was 14 months ago. The culverts under the decommissioned road are still there, silted and overgrown, dark and dry in the winter months. The procedural change is in the protocol document. The handwritten notebook is in a storage box in a regional authority archive, filed under the duty officer's name, in a section that is not routinely accessed. 43 animals passed through that facility during the 14 months when the scanner was unavailable or out for calibration. Most of those animals have no photograph from a camera trap. and no researcher who happened to be looking at an archive of water rat images on a Tuesday night. Most of those folders are closed. That is the fact this case leaves behind. Not a verdict. A number. 43. This case is one of hundreds that never made the headlines. If you think more people should know about it, share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe to Lost and Wild and tell us in the comments. Did you see the signs along the way? We will see you in the next case. Every animal has a story. Some take years to tell. This was one of them.